Hey, what's up guys? It's Colin and welcome back to Colin Makes Software. So today we're going to talk about getting set up and just getting things going and what you need to be able to do that. So I want to lead with a couple caveats. So first of all, there's 1,000 different ways to build a startup. Smart people will easily disagree with a lot of my choices. My very first recommendation is figure out what works best for your personality and your skill set. Try not to compare yourself to some famous entrepreneur out there. Steve Jobs was brilliant and all, but he was also in the right place at the right time and he had the right exposure to get his start. Just think about what you need to get something going. I'm a technical and design oriented founder, so I lean hard on getting the product and the messaging right. I'm not concerned so much about tech problems because I can kind of code my way out of things. If you're somebody who's not super technical, you may have to make different trade-offs. Another caveat, this is the first time that I've been able to build a startup without some intense financial pressure for my household. So in the past, I've always had contracting gigs on the side, and I'd take any spare second I had to work on my startup, working after everybody else has gone to bed. In this startup, I've got more time. You're gonna see my pace to be maybe a little heightened from what it's been in the past because I'm able to focus on this 4 days a week. Just set proper expectations for yourself, especially if you are doing side gigs. One more caveat is my goal is to live a balanced, family-focused life. So I'm not looking to make crazy amounts of money right now, and I'm not really interested in growing a company. My aim is to make something self-sustainable, and then we can always see what happens from there. If you dedicate 100% of your life to your startup, you can definitely go faster. I just don't think it's worth it. I think there's burnout. I think you become a different person based on those choices. That's not the choice that I want to make right now. Any decision that you can put off into the future, as long as you don't have major consequences, you should do that. But a few decisions can't be changed. So if you're seeking investors, that's a one-way street. You can't go back from that. If you start bootstrapping, you can always change your mind later, but it also affects the kinds of ideas that you can pursue. So it's a lot harder for a bootstrap company to take on an idea that's much bigger. A couple of my learned mistakes from past startups. I used to think that I had to build the whole thing before anybody should even see it. You need to get things out there faster. I didn't have a good eye for design. If you're leading with your product, you need strong design. But the basic rule for me is don't design above your ability. So if you're not a great designer yet, just stick to something simple. Even if it's not flashy, as long as it's clean, that makes a much bigger impact. I mean, go to Craigslist right now and you can see design is not necessarily the most important thing, but clarity in design is. I constantly built way too much. When I was building products, I was building more and more features and bigger features, and I kept finding myself quagmired in these positions where I couldn't come out and focus on the other aspects of the business. Your customer validation and customer onboarding is super important. So I wasn't able to focus my time on that because I just built too much. So with any idea I have now, I'm thinking, what are people going to pay for this realistically? And then what am I going to need to do to get into those people's minds? Learn how to fail faster. Got to be able to iterate and move forward and pivot and emotionally move yourself through that process safely. So in the beginning, my heart was outside of my body and it was just so easy to get crushed. Now I have learned I am more than what I can build. Okay, so one of the first things I think is important is getting your finances straight. You have to know what your monthly expenses are. How much does it cost your family to live? What's the proportion of that amount that you are responsible for? I like using mint.com to monitor our expenses and see what the real cost of living is. It's really beneficial to have that set up a couple months ahead of when you're actually going to start your startup, because then you can really plan that properly. I created this spreadsheet years ago and I've had multiple versions of this. It's a tracking of basically everything we need to live. So I try to categorize expenses, and what I've done is I've got a bunch of formulas in here. How much money do we have in the bank? How much credit card debt do we have? Basically trying to determine this number right here. How many months of runway do we have for living? So if I don't have a job, if I lose everything, how long can we survive? Gives me a sense of, okay, this is my timeline. I got to time box this in. All right, so I really love Notion for brainstorming and tracking work and progress like that. So we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more, maybe in some later videos. The first thing I wanted to do was use a no-code tool. So I started thinking about YCode and Softr are two really good platforms that I was looking at. My hope was that we could cut through a lot of the development and just get to the idea faster by doing something like this. No-code tools are great for people who are maybe not technical co-founders, but they might even be better for people who are, just because we can take those tools and make them do even more and kind of hack through the problems. So I dove into YCode and I tried to build something. It's really nice that they give you an Airtable backed database. They can user registration like login, password, sign up, reset password, all that stuff's written for you. You can just kind of plug and play. The designer in Ycode is actually not too bad. It allows for responsive design when you change the window size or tablet mobile devices. Softer is a nice tool as well. You can easily add in nicely designed hero sections or other parts of the app. Same deal with users and being able to have login pages written for you. Softer actually has a Stripe integration, so you can collect payments straight away from that. So that was really intriguing. But I gotta say that as I dug into these two, I just felt like I could not get them to work the way I wanted them to work. It was not gonna be the speed boost that I had hoped for. In fact, I think it was gonna slow me down and prevent me from providing the value that I can provide, which is, a strong user interface, strong user experience. So that was kind of a bummer for me not to be able to use some of these great tools to move things really, really fast, but that's okay. I will be using Amazon. So Amazon Web Services is my sort of cloud provider of choice. They have just got a lot of things that will be useful. I always run my front-end marketing sites just off of or really just the front end in general, off of a CDN. So I use Amazon S3 and I use Amazon CloudFront to deliver a static application without having to have servers. In terms of technical front end stuff, I'm historically an Angular person. I really enjoyed that platform, but I have always struggled with some of these frameworks with how much work it takes to do something that just feels like it should be easier to do. So getting back to kind of the roots of JavaScript, HTML, CSS, I'm going to look into Turbo and Stimulus as the framework that I want to use. Again, kind of because I'm really comfortable in the JavaScript CSS land. So that feels really right to me. I'm really excited about trying Tailwind. Tailwind is just going to be a lot easier to, I think, make very quick design edits and make things responsive very easily. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Another tool I'm really interested in is Replit. It's basically a collaborative code editor that actually runs your apps as well. So when I'm actually developing, I'll be using a traditional code editor in a terminal, but it's very easy to just kind of test some things out. I've got some various things I've been experimenting with Turbo and Stimulus and Tailwind here to learn about it. But even more than that, what's great about this is you can actually, for $7 a month, you can actually pay to have these run in the background. My plan right now is to run the backend API through Replit and not have to set up servers, load balancers, deployment mechanisms, or anything like that, and just kind of get to where run this straight from Replit. So that's going to save a ton of money and also is going to make it very easy to do deployments. So I'm excited about that. The other area we're going to save big on is the database. I'm going to start by using Airtable as my database. So Airtable is a site kind of like a souped up Google spreadsheet. You can create tables, you can have fields, you can have different views on that data. You can use it as an API, so you can actually use it as your backend for your system. This is probably a pretty dramatic jump for anybody who's watching who's a developer. I will say that this would not work if we had a heavy data idea. Airtable's got pretty strict limits on concurrency and how many people can be accessing your data at the same time. We'll have to get a little creative writing some throttling on our app to do this. So I'm really excited about saving on all the database costs that would normally have to set up. It's not just database costs we're saving here, it's also VPC costs, so virtual private cloud in Amazon's language, firewalled areas of the app, and I think by doing this, I'm going to save all of that effort as well. One more thing to add about Airtable is you're not just saving on the database costs, you're also giving yourself a way to edit as an admin of the system to basically make tweaks, fix bugs that happen, and you can also use tools like Zapier to make reactions whenever data changes. So when someone signs up, if you want to send them an email about their sign up, you can do that through Zapier instead of having to deal with all that code. And then for payment processing, got to use Stripe. I just love Stripe. It's really easy to use. It's exactly what I need. A couple other things about Amazon. So Amazon has their own email system. I think it's called Workmail or something like that. I always have used Google in the past for my email domains, but the cost has changed a lot. So now it's $18 a user. Amazon is $4 a user. The other thing about Amazon that's great is you can get a $300 startup credit. I was actually able to get this pretty easily. So I just signed up for their startup credit, explained what I'm doing. I got $300 basically on my bill that's free. Okay, and one more really critical tool for me is 1Password or a password manager like that. So basically I set up a vault for my company and I can save the, login password for all these sites that my business is going to use, and they're totally separate from my personal sites. Not only is that easier to manage, it's going to make me choose better passwords, but also if I do hire people or bring people on as contractors, I can share these passwords with those folks very easy and securely. The next 3.5 minutes or so are dedicated to setting up an LLC and all the things that go along with that. So if you weren't planning on doing that, you might want to skip ahead. And then let's talk about registering us as a business. So first I want to say you don't have to do this. If you've got an idea and you just don't even know if it's going to work or not, it's a really good idea to just skip this whole step and just get something out there to get some feedback going. But you can't really accept credit card payments until you have a registered business. So if that's something that you need to validate, or if you're very quickly wanting to do that, it's a pretty smart idea to just go ahead. So I think it's kind of up to you, your history. If you're kind of a first-time founder, I would not advise this until you get yourself feeling, okay, I'm definitely doing this idea. But I've actually already had a business kind of set up waiting to handle some sort of idea like this. So if you do want to do it, here's kind of some of the steps. If you are really nervous about this kind of stuff and you've never done anything like it before, I'd recommend checking out Stripe Atlas. It's actually pretty expensive for the service that they provide because you can do this a lot cheaper on your own. But if you really want that hand-holding experience and process, this is really easy to do. I think their price is $500. And they set you up with a company, they register everything for you. It's pretty great. But if you want to do this yourself, you can save a ton of money. I'm in Indiana, so Indiana's website is InBiz, and that's where you can find out if there's another business that has your name already, and then you can register your LLC. So if you're doing it all by yourself, I'd recommend being a single LLC, an SLLC. So it's a single member LLC. Just basically means you're the only owner of the business and you're not going to have employees. You get classified as a disregarded tax entity. So all your income and profits just go to straight to your own taxes. So it's the Schedule C, I believe. So it really simplifies the tax piece of it. If you have multiple founders, you're going to need an LLC. Once you do go through the business registration with your state, you'll get something from the Secretary of State. Then you can search apply for EIN. It's an employment identification number. There's a site with the IRS that you can do to basically just apply for this. It's really, really easy. You'll get a tax ID number that you can use with Stripe. And as well as that, you need a bank account. So the other thing I've done is I use Chase typically because there's one close to me. I needed my EIN, my employee identification number, to set up the Chase account. And then once I had the Chase account, I used that to set up my Stripe account. The other thing that I did personally is I got a virtual address, a virtual mailing address for my business. So I don't really want my home address being publicly shown for my business address. I use PostScan Mail, which is $15 a month. It's basically a real address. It's an actual street address. They'll scan your mail for you. They'll let you forward your mail, shred the mail, all that stuff. So I use this as my business's address, and then that's the address I use with registering for my business and registering my bank account and for Stripe setup too. So I had to set this up first, actually, go through an online notary, which is about $20, where they basically set you up and verify you are who you are. And then once you have that, then you can apply for the LLC. And then once you have the LLC, you can apply for the bank account. And once you have the bank account, you can set up Stripe. Another thing I do is to set up a phone number for my business. I don't want to use my cell phone number for my business. Stripe and Chase and other places may require you to have a phone number. I use Twilio for this. So you can basically buy a phone number. It's like $1 a month. And then you can set up a small script. I have something like this where it basically says, thank you for your call, please leave a message. So I technically have a phone number. It comes to me as a text message that I can read, and then I can call somebody back on my actual phone. All right, so let's take a look at some costs. So I said in my first video, we're going to do this with about a $500 seed budget. So I want to break that down a little bit to show you where I'm getting that number from. It's March 14th right now. I'm hoping that at the end of May, maybe I've got something out there that's possibly ready for someone to pay for. That's pretty aggressive, but I think we can do it. So I've got the first 3 months basically stacked out here. So that virtual address I mentioned, that's $15 a month. My bank is charging me $15 a month because I don't have a big enough balance in there. I need to buy some domains. So if I need 1 domain or 2 domains, they're about $12 a piece. And Replit is going to be the backend server that I mentioned earlier I can be running my backend on. All these other tools are actually free at the level I'm looking for. When you look at this, I don't need Replit until I have some sort of production server to run. And then with the virtual address, the Chase fee, and there is a design system that I am very interested in buying, which is Tailwind UI. So they have all these great sections of sites and navigation and just components that will make building something very, very fast. So I'm definitely going to buy that, and that's a little expensive. It's $279, but it's a one-time purchase. So that's the bulk of actually my costs here. So I'm at $408 by the end of May. I will say that since I already had a business registered, that doesn't technically fall into this budget, but if you were starting something from the absolute scratch, that would. And so for me, that was $20 to set up that notary for the virtual address. It was $97 in Indiana to register with Secretary of State. And Twilio, I put $20 into my voicemail, basically to pay for any calls that come in. So I have that phone number. And that would have been about $137 on top of this $408. So I'm probably going to have more expenses than this as we get through things. But right now, those are the forecasted main expenses. All right, guys, that is it for me today. So stay tuned next week for the big reveal. We're going to talk about the actual idea that I want to pursue. So please like and subscribe and let me know in the comments, what tools did I miss? I'll see you next week.